Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to the Comprenew webinar, Reimagine Tech. As a part of Tech Week's events, we're diving into some pressing topics around electronics recycling, reuse, sustainability, digital literacy. We've got a lineup for you today, some great guests. To start us off, I'd like to hand it over to Comprenew's president, Scott Vanderkoy, to touch on what Comprenew does and what we're doing with Tech Week.
Thanks, Alex. Well, welcome everybody, and a special welcome to our guest speakers. Just real briefly, a little bit about us. Comprenew is a nonprofit, highly certified data security and electronic recycler, headquartered here in Grand Rapids. We were founded in 1986 as an IBM mainframe refurbisher. About 70% of the used and surplus product we work on comes from corporations and about 30% from individuals from across the state. We're the only nonprofit in the world, as far as we know, certified to the highest standards and the highest certified for-profit or nonprofit headquartered in Michigan. We love technology, but we want it to benefit people and not harm them. So thank you again for being with us. We do have kind of an exciting period of time ahead of us, and we appreciate that you're spending time with us. So Alex, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Scott. Yeah, we have great guests with us today highlighting quite a few issues in today's electronics recycling and sustainability landscape. So first, we'll hear from Representative Carol Glanville touching on some insights for legislation and a greener and more data secure future. Roger from R2 is here discussing responsible recycling practices and the circular economy. Matt VanSweden from Progressive Companies, a leader in corporate sustainability engagement with employees and, again, environmental responsibility. And we also have Christopher Brennan, Comprenew's Director of Reclaim, who will be touching on the disassembly process, job training, and partnerships. So we've got a lot to cover, and Carol, please take it away.
Great. Well, thank you so much for having me here today. I'm super excited to be a part of Tech Week and the work that Comprenew does. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Carol Glanville. I am the state representative for the 84th district, which covers Granville, Walker, and the northwest side of Grand Rapids, a little bit of the northeast side, but kind of that upper region. My background is that, of course, I was born and raised in West Michigan, but formerly, prior to being an elected official, I was a teacher and educator, and part of that work was in educational technology. So I got my degree in ed tech before it was even called ed tech. At that time, it was curriculum and technology, or technology and curriculum design. And through that opportunity, I worked with public and private schools. I was at GRPS for a while in tech integration, and I led the one-to-one program at West Catholic and Catholic Central when they, sorry about that. When they decided to go one-to-one with iPads a few years back. That was my work. And so from that, I got a really strong introduction, of course, to how we use technology, in many instances in our lives. And after that, work with the schools, I landed with a group called Protect Young Eyes, which does internet safety work for families, and was going across the nation doing some just presentations around internet safety and also doing curriculum design. I eventually ended up doing instructional design at Grand Valley State for a little bit. And then I landed in the House. So technology, responsible use of technology, access to all the things is something that I am very dedicated to. And I continue to work in that space and my role as chair of higher ed and also on the K-12 education committee. So I wanted to talk to you all a little bit today about some of the legislation we have pending in the State House at the moment. We have a group of bills referred to as Right to Repair, and the Right to Repair bills cover let me see, grants consumer access to the tools, parts, and information needed to repair your digital electronic equipment, which aligns really well with the work that Comprenew does. And so this is something, again, coming from an ed tech space where we were having to, obviously in schools, repair devices for students. It was incredibly frustrating to be limited on what we could do, back of house, just on site, and having to have those contracts and whatnot, has always been an issue. So I see how this will lower repair costs. Obviously, it will allow people to use their skills as well. I mean, so many folks, are tinkerers and can just fix and do things, and that it voids their warranties and things like that. It's just ridiculous, right? It's all part of that kind of control that the tech companies, they get as much money as they can from us. So, and the next one, let me see, what else are we working on? E-waste and OEM accountability, which again aligns really well with what they're doing over there at Comprenew. So just anything I can do to support, new ways to recycle or to handle, waste management in general. We're looking at things, it's called EPR, where we're trying to kind of flip the model so that manufacturers are paying for recycling and reuse costs up front, in an effort to, control how much solid waste we have. I mean, if the companies are, putting a little bit more into it, maybe we won't get a new iPhone and I'm picking on Apple really bad here today, but maybe we won't get an new iPhone every 6 months, right? So just shifting that responsibility and being really aware of the impact of electronic waste, particularly here as a Great Lakes state, right? Trying to protect our water quality and all those things. So some other bills that we've passed recently or been working on is AI. In elections specifically, I am very interested in AI. I've always been a little bit of an early adopter for technologies, and I'm excited to be using AI in all of my work because it's such a time saver. I mean, I'm mostly on that like large language model use. And so just looking at the efficiencies that everyone can benefit from in AI, I think we need to be responsible about how we do our legislation, make sure we're not, cutting things off before they even get a chance to start by overregulating something that maybe we don't understand or, are afraid of, which is what we've seen, traditionally in this kind of work. So we have specific laws around AI in elections, and misinformation. Some deep fake, again, legislation aimed particularly at protecting voter integrity and election integrity, deterrent against deception, and some things like that. So that's where we are in that space. And I am looking forward to really, like I said, looking at how we can use AI better in all of our systems. And then finally, a couple things on the education side. I have a bill that is hopefully passing the Senate here this fall, which requires all of our high schools to offer a computer science course. Kids don't have to take it; they just have to have access to it, because we are lagging in this space in making sure that our kiddos have the digital literacy that they need to have, to be successful beyond school or even in school, so that they can do better research and design work and problem solving and all that stuff. So a huge support around that bill. So excited, expect that we will finish it. And I'm going to continue working in this space to continue elevating all the good things in technology. So thanks for having me here today.
Yeah, thank you, Representative Carol Glanville. So many great things that you're working on. Really excited about all the work you're doing to protect our kids. Extended producer responsibility is so important, making sure that manufacturers are pulling their weight, literally and figuratively. And so if we have people on this call who want to support some of this legislation that you have going on for our kids and greater responsibility in recycling, what's the best way to follow your journey and support those pieces of legislation?
Yeah, you can check my my legislative website. It's repglanville.com. Or you can reach out to our office or contact your own state representative. If you don't know who that is, you can reach out to us and we can help you find that person. We want to generate broad supports for these things. And so the more voices we have, the better. And there are ways that you can track legislation by keyword and things like that. So when something new comes up, you can get a notification for that so that it's coming to you if that's something you're interested in. And my office can help with all of that. And I can get you the number here. I don't know my phone number. I mean, I don't call my office very often.
That's understandable. I've got a cheat sheet in my office. Well, we can send all the links and the phone numbers out afterwards. So, okay, great. Thank you again, Representative. Such a pleasure to have you here with us. Okay, Roger, putting you in the hot seat. You are the R2 guru for SERI, the certifying body around responsible electronics and many other things. Hi, Roger.
Good morning, everybody. Hi. Yes, my name is Roger Greive, and with SERI, it's an international nonprofit to promote electronics sustainability in a couple different aspects. And like Representative Glanville, I was a tech freak and early adopter myself. I built my first synthesizer from scratch when I was 16, and back in the early 80s, I was one of the first 100 people to connect with my Commodore 64 and a 300 baud modem to do electronic banking. I'd like to say I was 8 years old at the time, but I was not. So it's one of those things where it was a fun experience, and I followed the development of technology through grad school when I was programming in Fortran on an IBM 360 shared mainframe to the computer I carry in my pocket now. So. And that's part of what SERI is concerned with, the fact that everybody's got these things all over the world. There's roughly 16 billion cell phones out there right now, and most of the world is connected, and a large percentage has even broadband access to everybody else and everything. But something has to be done with these devices, and that's what SERI does. We've got a number of programs, including R2 University, where we educate people and companies who want to have best practices for electronic sustainability, and the R2 certification program, which is the core of SERI to date. We're also starting a program of an ESG certification process for electronics companies around the world so they can focus on that. And I'll talk about that in just a sec. So the R2 certification program is, like I said, the core of SERI, and it focuses on three main areas: environmental responsibility, worker health and safety, and data security. And one of the foundational principles of the R2 standard is what we call the hierarchy of responsible practices, which calls for companies to find a reuse for materials first, and then materials recovery, starting with harvesting individual workable parts out of devices that can no longer be reused whole, and then finally after that, the recycling of those products so that we can recover raw materials to make new stuff out of that. So the emphasis is not on end of life. In fact, we don't even like that phrase. It's end of useful life to somebody before it goes on to be used by somebody else. When a laptop is manufactured, 80% of the total carbon impact of that laptop comes from the manufacturing process, and only 20% over the life of the laptop itself. So it makes sense to extend the life of that laptop in a corporate setting or even with individuals. Even by 1 year, you've taken away the need to replace that laptop so soon, because most of them can be used a little bit longer than everybody thinks they can be. And like Representative Glanville said, we're being pushed all the time to buy new stuff. The manufacturers want us to refresh our phones every 2 years when the phones themselves easily last 3 or 4. So with phones, it's 85% of the carbon impact comes from the manufacturing. So if we keep that in mind and talk about the lessening the impact we have with our own usage of devices, that's part of SERI's mission, to say, think about this as a company or as an individual. Can you use this one more time? Does it still have life in it? And is that life good? Can it be refreshed or have a new battery put in it or something like that, rather than having an entire new device in your hand? But when it's time to give those devices up, the R2 companies around the world can help people do the right thing with them. And that's why we have this standard. It's not easy to get, but it is possible to get. And we applaud Comprenew for being one of the companies, long-standing companies with an R2 certification, also an e-steward certification, which is another standard in mostly in America, whereas R2 is around the world. So the overall effect of this can be summed up through the ESG process, because ESG stands for environmental, social, and governance. For the environmental part, it's obvious. We're keeping things out of landfills. We're reducing the carbon impact of the manufacturing devices by extending the useful life, things like that. The social is more subtle. If a, someone is finished with a laptop or a phone and sends it to be recycled or repurposed quickly rather than sitting in a drawer for 5 or 10 years, that laptop or that phone can go to somebody who probably could not afford a new one. So the social impact, especially with families with children, we saw this in the pandemic, having the ability to have access to a laptop to connect to the internet is a really big thing, and it's very important. And probably Representative Glanville is working on this. So we help this process by making sure that these recycled or refurbished devices can get back in the hands of somebody who can use them. And finally, the governance aspect is both within companies themselves to make sure that their employees are taken care of and their employees are well trained and things are safe, and the cooperation of these companies with the existing regulations, especially in moving things around the world, plastics and electronics, it's a problem, and it's a problem we're addressing as we go forward. So at this point, there are over 1,200 certified R2 companies in 42 countries around the world. Any questions about it? We have a website with all this stuff in it. It's sustainableelectronics.org. And once again, I'm really happy to be included today and look forward to our conversation.
Yeah, thank you, Roger. Yeah, just the mission of reuse, that 80%. I know you've said it to me before, but every time you say it hits me again that 80% comes off that manufacturing process. So reuse is just so important. And like you mentioned, the social impact. I'm curious, you mentioned that you're around the world. What are some of the more recent countries who've adapted this standard, the R2 standard?
Well, they're growing everywhere, Alex. We have many companies in India and throughout Central and South America that are growing very quickly. Most of the R2 companies are still in North America, but it's spreading around the world. We have 4 employees in India now, and it's good that it's being picked up in countries around the world.
Yeah, very good. It's good to hear that that's happening and expanding. Thank you, Roger, again so much for being with us today and going over R2's mission. And you mentioned it's sustainableelectronics.org. That's where we can find out more. All right.
That's right. Yes,
Roger,
thanks.
R2 guru. Appreciate it. Our next guest is Matt VanSweden from Progressive Companies, also a Grand Rapids-based company, architecture, engineering, design. I'm sure he can speak more to it. Matt, hello.
Hi, Alex. Thanks for the introduction and thanks for inviting me to be here. It's a really pleasure to kind of share some of our work and some of our posture towards this very important topic. So, as Alex mentioned, Matthew VanSweden, I'm a sustainability leader here at Progressive Companies. We're a full service AEC, so architectural engineering and construction firm. Here headquartered in Grand Rapids, but we also have offices in Detroit and Charlotte, North Carolina. We've got about 300 humans that work with us. And we are on a mission. We are on a mission to transform spaces and empower people, driving performance through design. That's kind of our mantra, driving performance through design. I've been with the company for just over 6 months, and my charge has really been to kind of integrate higher levels beyond sustainability into our community practice. And the kind of focus area for me has been regenerative design, and what that means and how it can empower our folks to apply knowledge and leadership that is strategically relevant to our clients, right? How can we relentlessly pursue the fullest potential of each project, right? So regenerative design in its most basic form is really just a tool that helps empower organizations to thrive, including having thriving humans, right? Thriving humans is a major component to thriving organizations, but doing so in a way that promotes thriving across their entire value chain, right? Not just internal operations, but all the suppliers were dependent on the products in their useful life. Our products are a little bit longer than electronics, right? We design buildings and they're around for, typically 40, 80, 120 years, right? So thinking and being really thoughtful about the energy uses and the useful life of our product has a little bit different meaning, but it's still an important consideration, right? I love that Roger mentioned 80% of the embodied carbon of a device technology comes from the manufacturer, right? In buildings, it's similar, not quite that dramatic. 50% of a carbon impact comes from all the materials that we use to assemble and manufacture a building. The rest, 50%, comes from the energy to keep the lights on, to keep the air cool in the summer or warm in the winter, right? So, and to charge our devices, right? So it's an interesting frame, right? And be really thoughtful about all the decisions that we make in design and engineering to really optimize the carbon performance of our projects. But as we think about regenerative design externally in our projects, right, it looks differently than it does when we think about internal choices we have and what agency we have, right? Externally, as I mentioned, we're talking about decarbonization, we're talking about resilience, we're talking about biophilic design or designing for human health and well-being. We're also talking about how our landscapes inform biogenic carbon capture, right? How that can be and helpful to our clients who are being more accountable to their carbon emissions, right? Um, Internally, we're always hunting for partners that have a similar sort of posture, wanting to have thriving communities, thriving neighborhoods. So we're always hunting for partners that can help solve a business need, right? In a way that's adding value to our humans that we live with, humans that we work with, and humans that we call or like partners, right? So believe it or not, architecture and engineering uses a lot of tech, right? A lot of tech goes into our work. We're not tech savvy folks. Well, some of us are, but we're not focused on the technology. The technology is a tool to help us do our work, right? So we do need partners that think deeply and critically about technology, so that we can feel good about the use of it, right? Um, and we're also very aware, as Roger mentioned, there's a social cost to our tech, right? I think in supply chains a lot of our work in sustainability construction has to do with the impacts downstream of our buildings, right? And the supply chain in the tech, especially in batteries, has a very gnarly sort of reality right now. There's a lot of not pleasant human rights violations in that supply chain. So one of the most impactful ways that we've thought about our agency in this space is to think about what can we do to increase the useful life of the tech that we are dependent on to do our services, right? And so Comprenew, that's why we love Comprenew, because they're not just diverting e-waste from the landfill, which is really important. They also have a social mission. They're teaching, they're advocating, they're on the frontline communities with job training and helping folks understand tech and providing relevant job skills for tomorrow's economy, right? Um, and we think that's an idea of reciprocity, which is really fundamental to regenerative design, right? What's good for us that's aligned with our values is good for Comprenew, right? Um, and what's also lovely is the more successful we are as a firm, the more tech we will likely need, and the more we're going to lean into our relationship with Comprenew, right? And the more we lean into that relationship and we tell their story, the more successful Comprenew can be in its social mission, right? And the more successful Comprenew can be in its work, the cleaner our through their advocacy in circular economies, through their advocacy in right to repair, right? through their social enterprises, the better our whole value system or whole value chain of our tech becomes, right? So thriving in a way that promotes thriving. That's what we're trying to accomplish here. And really that's the call to action, right? As businesses, we have buying power. We have power to impact and choose partners that are aligned with the kind of future we want, right? And we could just find a low cost provider that will take our electronics and have us feel good about and them not going to the landfill. But we're being very intentional with our partnership and relationship with Comprenew because we believe in their mission and we believe in their social enterprise. We believe in their impact. And so the more we can do that across all the things we are dependent upon to do our work, and also as we think about the work itself, right? We're designing spaces. We spend 90% of our time in these spaces, right? That has a tremendous impact on human behavior. So the more thoughtful we can be on both sides of the exchange here, we can really lean into a really positive and hopeful, thriving humanity in the future. So that's our kind of perspective in all this, right? How we as consumers of tech can be really thoughtful, and as businesses, what we can do to partner with organizations that have a really compelling social mission.
Yeah, thank you so much, Matt. That hits on so many of the right points, and we appreciate the shout out from you on that. But you're so right. Roger touched on the circular economy, regenerative design, and it seems simple almost to think about. We've got the whole supply chain covered, but really, do we, and are we giving that the utmost thought and what happens before and after? Like you said, we're sitting in this room, it all came from somewhere. So just such an important perspective on all this. And the statistic you gave was 50% of the manufacturing carbon footprint comes up front. That's
Yeah,
pretty considerable.
we call that embodied carbon, right? There's buildings that contribute two primary ways to carbon. That's embodied carbon, which is the similar to tech, right? Similar to electronics. It's the carbon associated with extraction, transportation, assembly, manufacture, assembly. I already said assembly. But then operational carbon is the carbon associated with like running the HVAC, running, plugging in lights into devices. So yeah, it's not exactly 50-50. It's pretty close. But yeah, the more efficient our buildings are becoming because of code, the more impactful that embodied carbon perspective will become.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you, Matt, for being here and sharing your perspective on this. It's really great to have you here.
Thanks, Alex.
Okay, our last guest is Christopher Brennan. Can you call him a guest if he's an internal director at Comprenew still today? Speaking on a lot of the partnerships and programs that we have going on. And Matt touched on it there. It was a good lead-in for you on providing workplace skill and connection with some community organizations. So Christopher, welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, no, absolutely. I fully agree. I mean, really, everybody that's spoken today, I just keep seeing things where I'm like, yes, you're really hitting on the key missions here. Yeah, so hello everybody. Thanks for joining us with this important Tech Week webinar. I'd like to, extend that thank you again to Representative Glanville, our R2 guru Roger, and Matthew from Progressive Companies for all of those insights that you guys offered into what can be a very complex industry at times. As Alex mentioned, my name is Christopher Brennan. I'm the Director of Reclaim here at Comprenew. My role oversees the kind of intricate process of dismantling and recycling these electronic devices that we're talking about today, and navigating also the logistics around how we can recycle them best. Today, though, I'm going to highlight kind of a key aspect of what we do that Matthew also kind of referenced a little bit. One that speaks not just to our mission of reclaiming materials and protecting the environment through that work, but also empowering the people within our communities. So here at Comprenew, we know our work is not being carried out in isolation. Our efforts exist as part of a network of innovators, advocates, and everyday people who are striving to do their part for the planet. That's everybody on the panel. That's everybody watching today. We're all, working together towards the same goals. And what we do impacts everybody within Comprenew's community. So we are passionate about involving others in that work through meaningful partnerships, educational outreach, and employment opportunities for people who often face barriers to employment. In the spring of 2023, we overhauled our disassembly process to launch the AWARE Team Initiative, AWARE being an acronym that stands for Adults with Autism Recycling Electronics. This initiative was inspired by the work of Bill Morris, co-founder of Blue Star Recyclers out in Colorado, and a driving force behind eSteward's Advanced Plus program. In 2008, Bill had a chance to see a group of volunteers who were participating in a work experience program where they disassembled electronics. This program being designed to offer, valuable career experience to people with developmental or intellectual disabilities who were facing, difficulty finding work elsewhere. And when he went to that facility and he saw his volunteer group in action, he was astounded at the skill, the efficiency of their work. And I think it, kind of struck him like, why are these people having such difficulty finding, work when I see them doing amazing work right now? So that was kind of a crucial moment for Bill. And what he was inspired to do has reshaped many, many lives since, including my own. Bill decided to put the skills that these volunteers were developing to the test and worked with a local recycler to turn those training opportunities into job offers, launching a recycling team staffed by people with disabilities. It was a smash success, and that's no coincidence. The team's hard work proved that given a chance, they would triumph. The initiative was a game changer for the recycler, creating positive material impacts for the new employees, as well as countless bottom line benefits to the recycler themselves. The employees within this program had higher retention, fewer accidents, better production metrics, and they also brought unique perspectives with them, which benefited the entire organization. Bill's work has since been modeled across 17 other recyclers through eSteward's Advanced Plus program across the country, which champions the potential and unique talents of people with disabilities within the recycling industry. Comprenew saw all of this and began following in Bill's footsteps through the Advanced Plus program in February of 2020, seeing his vision as a perfect synthesis of our environmental and social missions. Then, a month later, the world changed as COVID-19 was declared a global pandemic, and our plans were forced to change along with all of those circumstances. But Comprenew remained dedicated to that idea, and it was something that really stuck with us as something we saw in the future of our company. So 3 years later, pieces began to fall into place. We secured grant funding from groups excited to support our mission. I was hired on to lead the charge for this project, and we began reaching out to forge partnerships with local groups such as Kent ISD, Beyond 26, and Hope Network, among others. Through these partnerships, the AWARE Team Initiative is more than just a disassembly program, although it excels within that. We are part of a growing and groundbreaking effort to reimagine the workforce within our industry by welcoming people with disabilities into supportive, empowering environments that allow their potential to manifest itself. And when that potential does manifest, well, the numbers pretty much speak for themselves. I mean, in their first year, the AWARE team recycled over 156,000 pounds of electronics brought to us by the business of our corporate partners, such as progressive companies, as well as donations from our friends and neighbors across West Michigan. That is 78 tons of electronics, which they handled, personally, every single, nut, screw, and bolt, breaking it down so that those materials within the electronics, the valuable precious metals, and various things which can be reused, all those materials can now be upcycled, or to speak to what Roger and Matthew have talked about with the manufacturing cost being such a huge part of the carbon emissions around this industry. When you have these reclaimed materials, you can use them in place of those raw materials which would have been extracted elsewhere, thereby reducing the impact of manufacturing on our environment while still creating the things that we need in our everyday lives. So halfway now into the AWARE team's second year, we are on track to fly past that 78-town record, I'm proud to say. Having expanded the reclaim work area twice over and refined our work process into a model that is efficient, sustainable, and designed to emphasize the needs and abilities of our team. They've come a pretty long way and learned a lot about the reclaim process, and so have we. seeing how swiftly they can transform your average desktop into just a dizzying variety of materials and components really never ceases to amaze. More than that, we've learned so much from this program that we really truly do believe could benefit the industry as a whole, and even other industries could benefit from some of these lessons. Not just in the value of inclusive employment, but also, as Representative Glanville spoke to a bit, the crucial necessity of legislation which better supports our work. The planned obsolescence, the repair barriers that some companies are implementing in their products, such as, in terms of what we see in our everyday, there are, batteries which are complicated and sometimes even dangerous to remove. Dozens of tiny little proprietary screws that exist in place of what could be used just a few standard Phillips heads. All of these things create challenges for us as recyclers to actually be able to break that down. We have to work through all of these kind of hurdles that are being put in our way. And it's a bit of a running joke for my team to groan when we see an Apple logo coming our way, which is, it's a reputation that they've earned by building products which require special tools, buckets of elbow grease, and a saint's patience to fully disassemble and break down. They're far from the only ones, though. I'm not just singling out Apple. Time and time again, we do come across manufacturing practices in the products that we work on that frankly hamstring our efforts to ensure that these products are recycled responsibly. And often these practices exist also to force consumers to purchase new products for no reason other than the difficulty of servicing the goods that they've already paid for. As Representative Glanville alluded to, it is imperative that we consider the full life cycle of the electronics we produce, including repairs to extend their use, build processes that pay heed to dismantling those products later on, and the elimination of proprietary technologies that serve only to artificially restrict a product's lifespan. As Roger said too, there are so many devices that we could keep using, but when your phone breaks and you take it to the phone shop, you learn that it's going to be an exorbitant cost, simply because some of these manufacturing practices have come into play deliberately to artificially raise that cost. But despite all these challenges, we have gotten our work down to a science over in Reclaim, and we're getting better and better every day, with a close eye on downstream opportunities throughout the Midwest, helped enormously by the collaboration of certification standards like R2 and eStewards. We are seeing the materials that are extracted and reclaimed by the AWARE team bringing funding back to our organization like never before. This support enables us to expand and improve our capabilities, not only within the company, but also beyond our doors. We've had the great fortune to partner with Kent ISD and Granville Public Schools adult education programs, with vocational training classes on both campuses going strong into their second year now. Working closely with Comprenew, these classes educate everyone, staff and students alike, about the vital role of electronics recycling in protecting our environment, while also training students on valuable job skills to carry with them into an increasingly tech-centric workforce. Some of the critical skills these classes offer include practical training in the use of tools, the identification of various electronic components, as well as soft skills such as adaptability, problem solving, and teamwork, just to name a few. Along with these efforts, we are working with local businesses, nonprofit organizations, and state agencies to facilitate e-waste awareness, developing recycling access in underserved areas through our collection events, promoting legislation which safeguards our environment and supports local business, encouraging consumers to consider greener alternatives through our selection of refurbished products, and advancing digital equity among low-income families by providing home computers and tech training through our Connect All Michigan program. Here at Comprenew, we see an array of different electronics every day. But our mission isn't just limited to the materials that we handle. In the modern world, electronics are everywhere. They're in our pockets, our ears, our cars, our homes, but also our landfills and our groundwater and our oceans. In 2023, the world produced 62 million tons of e-waste. And in the same year, only 22% of that was properly recycled. We live in an incredible moment among all these little marvels of electronics that allow us to accomplish so much. But these little marvels can create big problems if we don't use this moment to consider their effects on our environment and plan for our future. Comprenew plans to present to you all today and in all our efforts going forward a model for how to reduce, reuse, and properly recycle electronic waste. We are here to educate companies and consumers about the hazards of electronic waste while providing solutions that not only serve our communities, but also give back to them. Protecting our planet means more than recycling a single computer, or even 1,000. It means embracing opportunities to do more, working together to build the future we wish to see. For nearly 40 years, Comprenew and its partners have worked to uphold these values. Today, we continue that legacy and invite each of you to join us in this important mission. If you would like to learn more about the work we're doing or see what you can do to contribute, please come by our headquarters at 629 Ionia Avenue tomorrow for the facility tours that we're hosting as part of Tech Week. You can head over to our website at comprenew.org. And I also encourage you to check out the feature that we had in the Aware Now magazine's 50th anniversary issue, which goes into more detail about the successes that we found through our Aware Team initiative. And with that, I think I can hand things back to you, Alex.
Thanks, Christopher. You covered the gambit there. Took a couple of my closing statements, so I'll make some of my notes. No, I really appreciate all that you do here, Christopher, and this program has really been a success. And as you mentioned, just like with the partners that we have here on our podcast and in watching, can all make a big difference and support people and a sustainable future. You cracked me up. You said a saint's patience, and that's so true. I think the the best part of what we do here is getting a certain item in and wondering how that's going to be taken apart, and that falls to you and your team. And sometimes me, when you include me, it's certainly a journey sometimes. And as you said, Apple tends to have a reputation for making that as difficult as possible, but they are recognizing they need to start taking steps in the right direction. Are there any good brands? Are there any brands that do it better?
Well, it's a bit of a complicated answer, I guess, that I can give because, part of what we do means that we're getting, donations from people. We're getting the work from, corporate partners who are maybe overhauling their entire fleet of equipment. And the reason that I kind of give that context is it means that we have a pretty broad array. So, I mean, I could shout out, for instance, I could say Dell is great because they have a very standardized, format and the way that they build their computers. But as soon as I say that, I also flash back to the fact that I was, helping somebody work out the puzzle of a 30-year-old Dell computer the other day, which follows entirely different, manufacturing practices because it's been 30 years, things change, particularly in tech. But, I will just kind of give, I guess, a more general shout out to the fact that we have surely seen in the last 10, 15 years a big move towards some of that standardization of how computers are being made and how electronic devices are being made in general. I think more and more there is that growing awareness among companies that the way that they choose to build things does have an impact on the environment later on. And so I think we have seen a lot of shift in those manufacturing practices. So I guess I can't give a specific shout out here, but I'll give some kudos to the industry as a whole in that the idea is starting to click that we can all do our part at every step of that process to help out the people and the planet that are being affected.
Yeah, so true, and so important. So we have a couple of questions here that we got here and there. So I just want to quick touch on a few things to go back through. The first one for you, Representative Glanville, you touched on data security and some of the laws that we have in place at schools. And so if there are people who are wondering, like, once kids or at home, the way that our networks are protected? Like what are there certain things that we should be doing as people, as families, to protect ourselves from, data security and where all that data is going? What can we be doing?
Yes.
Yeah, that's a simple, broad answer.
I mean, there are so many options, unfortunately, much of this is incumbent on the user to figure out, right? And so it's how much time, energy, are you willing to put into securing your systems and your data when you're not a professional? And again, with every piece of equipment being different, every app is different, there's a real lack of standardization in security. I think that's where it becomes important to step in with some regulation and legislation to help put some guardrails on those things. One thing that I'm working on is an age appropriate design code, which would set some guidelines around how minors' data can be used, manipulated, and sold. And so we're working on that, and hopefully, a few states have picked this up ahead of us. So we're trying to tweak out some of the issues that have come up with it, but hoping to get something out there to help protect just from the get-go data and how it's used with our kiddos. Another thing that I'm working on is tied to this, and it has to do with something we call default to safety. And I'm not sure that we can apply it to devices because that would be an interstate commerce issue. But if we can apply it to apps and websites, right now when you download something like an Instagram or Snapchat or whatever, any app really, it's wide open for sharing.
Hmm.
And again, it's incumbent on the user to figure out how to tighten that down and protect their data and things like that. So I'd like to see that flip so that when you receive a product, it is as locked down as it can be. And it is now incumbent on the user to figure out how to open it up, to the standards that they would prefer.
Right.
So I think, those are two things that we can do in that regard. But yeah, all the equipment has safety measures related to it that, again, if you want to figure it out, you can. I want to plug my friends at Protect Young Eyes one more time. They have a lot of step-by-step device specific directions, particularly for parents on how they can protect access and equipment in their homes with their kids.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. Yeah, true. Check your settings and support the great legislation going on. Yeah, it really takes a consciousness and a willingness to protect yourself. So, yeah, thank you for sharing. And then I have another question. It might fall to you and it may fall to Roger perhaps, but as far as right to repair goes, are there like certain manufacturers that are like, are they helping, or is that the primary push against why some of the right to repair isn't more popular as a piece of legislation? What are we up against?
I don't know if Roger has anything to say about that. I have a few
We'll
thoughts,
kick it
but
to him. Okay.
see what Roger has first.
All
Okay.
right, thanks, Daryl. It's a balance between a corporate need to maintain their own proprietary information and their ability to sell stuff and move product against the bad PR they might receive from doing some of the onerous practices they've been known for in the past with locking down things or making sure that parts can be replaced with perfectly good but non-manufactured parts by the original manufacturer, things like that. There's a lot going on in the right to repair area that is seems to be moving in the right direction, but of course moving extremely slowly. It depends on the state you live in. I am a resident of Ohio, and we are so far behind what Michigan is doing. For instance, it's one of those things that it depends on where you live and what the emphasis is of the part of the state level government that I applaud Michigan. You guys live in a great place, and it's one of those things where keep in touch with your own elected representatives, as well as updates from the manufacturers.
Thanks for that, Roger. I appreciate the props there. Yeah, I think it's interesting. And Roger gave this example, right? You said you built a synthesizer when you were 14.
16, but yes. Yeah.
Okay, right. And I think like the first, correct me if I'm wrong, the first computers, like personal computers, were built in garages. So this idea that it has to be this very, exclusive, proprietary, your average human would just break it if they even, tried to fiddle with it, kind of thing. I think it's an interesting perspective that the tech companies have talked us into, because it's pretty clear, humans are innovative creatures who will figure it out. And, the idea that you have to be this very specific person to be able to handle the equipment, I think, is a little bit of a false narrative that we've agreed to, because many of us don't understand the technology. So we think we do need that very, again, like exclusive expert to walk the minefield.
It's also technological, Alex. The memory on a phone is soldered to the motherboard, and the motherboard itself is the size of a stick of gum. So it's really small stuff, and it's all hooked together. You can't just unplug a hard drive and plug a new one in a phone, because it's an SSD drive and it's soldered to the board. So these technological miracles that allow us to carry around a computer in our pocket are the same things that's slowing us down in terms of being able to repair them ourselves, or entering the complicated universe where things can be fixed.
Yeah. Such a complex issue. So many angles to work. Thank you both for your perspective on that question. The next question is for Matt. At Progressive, do you have any particular internal initiatives that you work on to promote employee education and engagement, and whether that's like truly internal or in the community? What does Progressive do to facilitate this?
Yeah, great question. We have a really robust set of humans that are actively supporting lots of different initiatives internally. Culture by design is what we call it. So we're trying to like cultivate really healthy, cultures of responsibility. Leadership is one of our core principles. So how can we kind of instill and spread that idea, that perspective across all 300 folks that work here, right? Across different geographic regions. So yeah, we do open up, and we've done big events in the past where we've gotten like a trailer for e-waste, and we just like open it up and everybody collects and brings in their devices, electronics that they don't no longer need. And so there's active internal communications around how we can be better humans, better stewards, be more thoughtful consumers. We can always obviously do more, and a lot of our education is actually through our project work too, right? And so there's a lot of just education on how we can be better professionals, better designers, better engineers. That kind of trickles down into how we show up in our private and personal lives too, right?
Mhm.
So, yeah, we spend a lot of time and attention around dedicating specific roles to help share information and how to get access to resources, know what's available. So yeah, it takes it just doesn't happen, right? It does take dedicated human time to tell these stories and connect folks to resources. And we've got a pretty vibrant set of Culture by Design is just one of many committees that are focused on some of that work. So yeah, it does, and it's been going on for like 10 years. Like we've got a long relationship with Comprenew, and specifically in this conversation, but kind of a long legacy of thinking about e-waste. And like another sort of professional intersection, right? Like we do a lot of green building certifications for our clients, and LEED has the dominant framework that a lot of organizations point to when they're building new buildings. And e-waste recycling has kind of made its way into some of those standards as prerequisites. It's forcing companies to have a thoughtful response and thoughtful solution to how to collect and divert electronic waste from landfills. So it's, again, in doing that work, and helping our clients solve that problem, we've got a little bit of a leg up because we've solved it internally. Well, we haven't solved it, but we're working on the solution internally so that we can articulate a potential solution for our clients downstream too. So yeah, it's reciprocal, right? It's both and we have obviously dedicated people that tell those internal stories and connect folks with resources, but then we're also doing the work with our clients to wrestle with very similar issues.
Yeah, amazing. Great. Yeah, thank you. So we have like just a couple minutes left here. I'm being conscious of the clock and all of our time, but there is an interesting question about, and then it applies to all of our guests here about solar panels. And I'm curious, Matt, if you have this question come up from your clients, Roger, what we're looking forward, like as we look forward, recycling, and I know that R2 or SERI has a few things going on. And Carol, you're also working on legislation around solar. So maybe let's start, Matt, and go in that order. And you have 4 minutes. Go to cover solar
Yeah.
panels.
Solar is interesting. It is technology, obviously. It does have a relatively short lifespan. Well, long compared to like PCs and devices in our pockets, but short and compared to buildings, right? It's like about 20, 25 years. Um, the interesting thing is, very few projects 20 years ago were deploying solar panels in their properties, right? So we're not really yet at the like end of life cycle for a big swath of solar panels that have been distributed or like have been installed in the marketplace. So it's kind of like an emergent problem, right? Like probably not right now, but in several years from now, we're gonna have to have really thoughtful conversations around how we redeploy, because the useful life, and I love, Roger, you said end of life isn't accurate, right? When we say useful life at a solar panel, like 20-year, what we mean is it's producing less than 80% of its original production, right? It's still producing 80%. It's still like valuable. It can still produce electricity, right? And so it's just an interesting opportunity to think about how we can deploy or redeploy those assets into other sort of spaces. The other thing, and I'm conscious I'm taking all the time here, but batteries in paired with PV is an emergent thing from a resilience perspective, and we're getting more and more brownout like power outages through extreme weather events. So more folks are thinking about battery storage, and electric vehicles comes up because we deal with infrastructure. So like massive battery infrastructure is also kind of like top of mind, and like how we do that thoughtfully and what the supply chain is downstream. Those are all, yeah, really relevant conversations in our work for sure.
Yeah, of course, absolutely. And Roger, you're starting to have those conversations, right?
Yes, we are. I'll summarize it by saying, yeah, what Matt said.
Okay.
But the other consideration for solar, and very quickly here, is that as the efficiencies increase, the number of total units of electricity produced per square meter of solar panel, the older ones can be switched out for more efficient new ones, and then the older ones are still usable, as Matt said. So the reuse of these are it to be taken down and hooked to a new inverter, a new battery system, and off you go with a new location for the old panels. So that's why R2 just added PV materials to the R2 standard 6 months ago, and companies have 3 years to adopt it. So I would very quickly add, as we finish up, if anybody listening or watching has the chance to tour the Comprenew facility, I did myself 2 months ago, and it's an amazingly wonderful place and some of the top-notch work in the country at this point. So if you get a chance to go, please do so.
Well, thank you, Roger. We really appreciate that. And we love having you. So walking around.
It was fun.
Yeah, that's tomorrow. So what Roger's talking about with our tours. Representative Glanville, any parting words on solar? Maybe this is oh, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, no, I say I really appreciate hearing that idea about what does that look like going forward, and right now we're talking about just getting it installed and up and running, and we haven't had I have not been involved in a conversation where we talk about what happens next. So great to have this top of mind and start lifting that up, because 25 years isn't too far off.
Yeah. And like you said, they've been being installed, and so at some point it's really going to become a prevalent issue. So, and we're also at the same time, I know Carol has some projects going on to get them installed into places. So maybe this is a great highlight of what it takes to have the conversations about what happens before and after, before we get into the thick of it. So maybe that's our parting message for today, is just the consciousness across the storyline of the products that we're producing and using, and we get to have the conversations now. So then people like Christopher and I, when it shows up at our doorstep here in the next couple of years, the Wear team is gonna need to be prepared to do what they do. So yeah, so thank you all so much again for being here and sharing your perspectives. We have such a complex environment that we're working in here, but all of these pieces are really going to make it a better place, a more sustainable place, and protect each other and the environment. So just a last couple of things is we have launched a podcast. Our first episode is out now. It's called Don't Throw It All Away. We're taking sustainable choices in a digital world, and we have a few of these guests that were with us today on that podcast. So we actually do, Representative Glanville and I do touch on that. So in our episode, which will be launched next week. So episode 1, and then check for that episode coming out next week, which is great, followed by Rogers, and such an exciting opportunity to dive further into some of these things. So we don't do solar in 4 minutes. I think we take a little bit longer. So um, other than that, Roger, thank you again for you touched on the facility tours. Those are going on at our facility, Comprenew facility downtown, tomorrow between 10 and 4. We have a Montcalm recycling event, Montcalm County, in partnership with MCC, a community event in 2 locations there on Saturday between 9 and noon. Christopher is speaking at one of our partners events next week, the Beyond 26 Gala. So they're hosting a gala if you're interested in supporting the work that they do. And then we've got plenty more recycling events throughout the year. Next Saturday, we're doing Union Township up in Mount Pleasant, and we could go on and on. And the great things that you guys are sharing, I can also pass along to everyone. I've been taking notes about links and different contact information and all the things. So once again, thank you so much, everyone, for being here and sharing your perspectives. Such a great opportunity to share some education and knowledge around these issues.
Thank you, Alex, and everyone. It was a great conversation. Look forward to connecting even more.
Yeah,
Yep.
absolutely.
Thanks very much.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
you look at that could be a new thing for Comprenew tagline: cooperation and education equals efficiency. So that article is pretty awesome. I was gonna actually try to